Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami. Fantastic. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharani Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Paskachad Satarni. Just as a sidelight, there's a devotee, Prabhupada disciple, his name is Prachatos. And he's an interesting person. And he was an early techie. And, you know, we're going back to 1975 in Chicago. And he wanted to do the definitive recording of Prabhupada chanting Jai Radha Madhava. And by Prabhupada's Vyasa-san, he'd set up this, it looked like a NASA launch center. You know, he had all these, you know, a headphone with an antenna, and for 3 days he was check, all the sound, everything, you know, recording, devotees playing kartals to get the right, you know, everything. Prabhupada came in, sat down on his Vyasa-san, you know, greeted the deities and everything, sat down on his Vyasa-san, picked up his kartals, and Prajatos flicked the switch, poof, just like the movies. A cloud of smoke came up, and the whole thing shorted out. And Prabhupada didn't chant Radha Madhava. He put his kartals on the table. He looked over and said, "This is material life." Prabhupada said, "Big arrangement, but no result." And Prabhupada went on speaking from there, you know. In the Mahabharata, we'll get back to the text, but in the Mahabharata, when Krishna, you know, Arjuna, Agni Dev wants to eat the whole forest because he's got indigestion from all the materialistic people, swaha. So the forest is full of herbs. So you burn the forest, and then Agni Dev would eat the forest, and he'd be sold his, like taking a Pepto-Bismol or a digestive aid. Did you get it to work? No. Okay. So and there's a whole story that Indra, you know, puts an umbrella of, no, Indra tries to put out the fire, and then Arjuna makes a whole canopy of arrows. So the water can't come in, so the fire burns, so Agni gets the herbs to solve his indigestion. There's also an additional side story that Indra, of course, is the father of Arjuna, and he's defeated by his son, which is very sweet, you know. So if the father, you know, the father likes that when the son is, you know. So, but the point is, in the forest was Mayadanava, the famous architect of the demigods, and he was a mystic and had so many things. So Mayadanava was grateful that Arjuna saved him. So he wanted to give a benediction. And he offered Arjuna it's called Yantra Veda, which is mechanical science, all these devices, machinery, all of this stuff. So Mayadanava offered that to Arjuna. And Krishna said, "Don't take it. It'll spoil everything." So we're very proud of all this mechanical whiz-bang, but it actually just spoils everything. Instead, so Krishna said, ask for something else. And Arjuna asked, that's how he got his horses for his chariot. So we're reading Shivaram Maharaj's Vyasa Puja offering. Please accept my humble obeisances at the Chintamani dust of your lotus feet. All glories to your divine grace, the fearless champion of your disciples and followers. On January 26th of your last year with us, while in Jagannath Puri, you attended an evening function to inaugurate the publication of a book on a contemporary of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In attendance were the most respectable pandas and dignitaries of Puri, all Brahmins, of course. The setting was a pandal on the beach. After some problems with the sound system, you disclosed how, in our humble way, ISKCON was, quote, trying to introduce Jagannath Swami culture, end quote, around the world. Ratha Yatra was the beginning of that cultural introduction. You told how the first ISKCON Rath Yatra was held in 1967 in San Francisco, and how by 1975 the San Francisco Rath Yatra was recognized by the city council as a holiday and acknowledged by the police as drawing a crowd of people who were not, quote, the window-breaking crowd in the protest days, you know. Then you spoke of the London Rath Yatra, where the Guardian, which is one of the biggest papers in London, or in England, where the Guardian newspaper criticized the Rath Yatra as a rival to the Nelson Column. Nelson Column was built to Admiral Nelson when they defeated the Spanish Armada. It's one of the biggest, British pride. Hail Britannia. But here was the Rath Yatra cart was defeating it in its opulence and size. New York, Melbourne, Sydney, Paris followed, you said. Quote, so in the Western countries, Rath Yatra is being introduced one after another, and Jagannath Swami is attracting the attention of the Western people, end quote. Then you began the thrust of your talk, your purpose for speaking. You argued that Jagannath's popularity would bring tourists to Puri, which would obviously benefit the temple, hotels, shops, government, everyone. But there was a problem. Quote, unfortunately, you do not allow these foreigners to enter the temple, end quote. You were not pulling. Picture the scene. Prabhupada sitting in front of all these proud pandas, and, they don't let Westerners, devotees, if you're not born in India, you can be a meat eater, whatever, but if you're not a certified Hindu, you can't come in. And so they wouldn't let the devotees come into the temple to see Jagannath. Inconceivable. How did you, well, anyway, let me finish this, okay, because it's a mood thing. We'll talk about that later. Because he's creating a mood. So just picture this scene. Here's all these proud scholars, all Brahmins, all Indian-born, and they won't let the Western Vaishnavas in because, we're not born in India and whatever, So forget eating fish. Some of them even ate fish. But still, they wouldn't let the Vaishnavas from the West in. And here's Prabhupada, truth to power, speaking to them. But there's a problem. Unfortunately, you do not allow these foreign Vaishnavas to enter the temple. You were not pulling any punches. Your voice was commanding, but appealing. How can it be adjusted? It could be, but local custom ran deep. And while the locals appreciated you in their own way, that appreciation wasn't deep enough to accept that you could transform Yavanas into Brahmins. You understood that. Still, you had come with a purpose and a message. Maybe they would hear. Quote, you do not expand the mercy of Jagannath. He is not this Purinath or Oriyanath. He is Jagannath, of the universe, not just the city of Puri or the state of Orissa. And that is the definition of Jagannath, Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. What to speak of Puri, with the whole earth, all the planets. That's Jagannath. So why you deny the inhabitants of Sarva Loka the darshan of Jagannath? End quote. You chided your audience. Quote, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu never approved of such a thing. Why should you resist? Why should you resent? This is not very good. You quoted Sanskrit, and to those in the know, it was clear that you just called them candidates for hell. Without breaking stride, you then supported your indictment with the Srimad Bhagavatam. They were being received very nicely. And they were being received very nicely. I don't follow. In the Christmas period, in a week from the message of Jagannath all around the world was being accepted. So here Prabhupada says, in the Christmas period, in a week from 17th to 24th of December, our devotees had sold books, big and small, 17 lakhs. Prabhupada's talking. And there was the BBT, massive temple expenses, and 200 buses, all to preach this Jagannath cult all over the world. Again, you appealed to your audience. After all, they were learned. Quote, I do not know what is the cause. Here you are all present, many learned scholars and pundits, so you consider why this restriction should be there, end quote. These words were reminiscent of Krishna chiding Arjuna by saying, you're speaking like a pundit, but what you're mourning for what is not worthy of grief. But if they remain adamant, so what? Quote, of course you don't allow. There is no, I have to say, loss on the part of the foreigners, because Jagannath has already gone there, and they are worshiping. Prabhupada's saying, fine, you think you've got Jagannath locked in a box? He's already gone there. He's already parading down Fifth Avenue. Who are you? You can't keep the moon in a basket. But if they remain adamant, so what? Of course you do not allow. There is no, I have to say, no loss on the part of the foreigners, because Jagannath has already gone there, and they are worshiping. We are already getting Jagannath darshan. Not only that, Jagannath had even crossed the ocean to help your mission. Shivaram is saying, not only that, Jagannath had even crossed the ocean to help your mission. Even if his pandas did not understand, Jagannath was for Sarvaloka. And then you unleashed your final rebuke, a condemnation. You could probably hear a pin drop. Imagine the truth to power. But this is an etiquette that to Vaishnavas, Vaishnava aparat, has been very much condemned by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You should welcome them, to receive them well, end quote. To strict, pure devotees is an offense, Vaishnava aparat. The thundering waves of the ocean beach went quiet. He's just called them operatis, that you won't let these Vaishnavas in. Offense? Many of the Pandits would think. Are these Westerners even Vaishnavas to be offended? You answered the Puri Brahmins with an invitation to see the ISKCON's world for themselves. You also can come there. See how beautiful the temples are. So many Jagannath temples, Radhakrishna temples, how they're being worshipped, how these foreigners, how they become pure Vaishnavas, end quote. Yes, pure Vaishnavas. We were strictly following the four regular principles and diligently chanting the Maha Mantra. On the basis of scripture and the precedent that you cited, quote, why should you not receive them as Vaishnavas and give them proper reception, end quote. And while offering the olive branch to combinedly work for Jagannath, Prabhupada said, you also shook a stick. Remove this restriction of short-sightedness. And that was it. You ended. But after thanking your audience, you had to be reminded why you had been invited there. The book, the inauguration. Without saying the name of the author, you added, quote, this book is now inaugurated. Thank you very much. That's all Prabhupada said. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada. Although you repeatedly were invited to see Jagannath in his temple, you refused. You would not go until your disciples could attend. So they asked Prabhupada, will they invite him, Shanai band, everything. Prabhupada wouldn't go. Where did I leave off? Acha. Thank you. Only a decade before, your followers had lived in decadence, yet you stood on that podium and praised them, those same disciples, to the most aristocratic representatives of Vaishnava culture. To those of high birth and good fortune, you raised us as equals on the basis of what you declared to be our service and our surrender to Jagannath. But may I humbly submit the perspective of my own. Our credentials were not our service or our surrender to Jagannath, but our service and surrender to you. For us, you were and still are everything, even while Jagannath remains the Lord of the Lokas. You are our everything for reasons too numerous for me to count. But on that evening in January, one reason shone forth like the rising full moon over the Puri ocean. Despite our past, despite our lack of Vaishnava culture, you were proud of of our Guru Nishta, our faith in you. But how could we not have faith in a person who valued us and stood up for us as you did? Thank you. Your servant forever, Shivaram Swami. Jai. There was someone wrote a letter to Prabhupada. Devotees used to be heavy, and sometimes we still are. There was what time is it? Okay, I'll just tell this story and we'll end, because I don't want to hold everything up. And then we can figure out what happened here. There was the temple president in Detroit would give the devotees on Sankirtan. In those days, Sankirtan meant we had a Harinam party, and then some devotees would distribute Back to Godhead magazine, or maybe we had Krishna book in those days. I think we had the Macmillan Gita also. But how to distribute it was a mystery. And the verse, he would give us a verse of the day from the Gita, and that was, you're supposed to form your preaching, your presentations based on that verse. So one day he selected as a verse, it has, the line, Avajante mam mudha. That you're a fool, you're a rascal, you're a donkey, you're mudha. So you saw all over Detroit, downtown, mostly it was businessmen, young brahmacharis. They had some businessmen by the tie, and they were, and you're a fool, you're a rascal, you don't surrender to Krishna, So we weren't very sophisticated in our presentation. So what was I going to say? Oh, so some lady, educated woman, had met one of the devotees in this fiery mood, and had then written to Srila Prabhupada. And they said, your devotees seem a little rough, and they seem, there's some kind of, there's frustration, and it comes out in the anger for, she wrote like that, And Prabhupada, it was in Back to Godhead, and Prabhupada wrote back to her. And he said, even if there's some fault, like there's spots on the moon, and they, they've given their whole lives, and he quoted so many verses, Prabhupada stood up for the devotees. Later on, he wrote another letter to the devotees that, you have to be, what is the use of your presentation if they become offended and go away? And, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, humble persuasion and austerity of speech in Bhagavad Gita is to speak, what is it? Sweetly and according to, and speech that doesn't offend. So Prabhupada chastised us. But to this lady, he stood up and defended the devotees. So Prabhupada was very proud of his, in a sublime way, of his devotees. This is completely off the track, but a little tangentially connected. And last story. Narinarayan's wife, Dina Dayadri? I think that was her name. Yeah. So she was at probably 18, 19 years old at the most at this time. This is in India. She was with that first wave that went to India. And they were having a Pandal program. And the man who had sold the stage, rented the stage, had cheated the devotees. Left, right, front. And you go to India, they just, anyway, it's endemic. So he'd shown them this stage, certain size, certain quality, certain strength. The stage he showed up for the Pandal was, brand X, weak, small, feeble, old. And then you've got the devotees. It was too late. So they had the program. They put the nice throne with the deities, Prabhupada, Vyasa-san. At the end of the Pandal, all the devotees get up and dancing. You've got 25 devotees dancing on this funky little stage. It was about to give out. So the man was trying to get the devotees to sit down, and we're not going to, 15,000 people, if not more, out there in the audience, and Prabhupada in ecstasy dancing around the deities. They're not sitting down. So men on one side, deities and Prabhupada in the middle, ladies on the other side. So Dina Dayadri was by the side of the stage, and this man was pulling on her sari. He thought if he could get her to sit down, maybe the rest would sit. So he's pulling on this poor girl's sari. She's trying to get away with it. None of the men notice. They're all Hare Krishna, Krishna, in ecstasy, Everyone's looking this way. And this girl, the young, is trying to get away from her. all of a sudden, Prabhupada picked up one of his kartals, swung it like a boom, hit the guy right in the chest. Didn't break a rib, but you can be sure it hurt. You know, boom, and the guy was, and he let go of the girl, sorry, and let her go. Like Prabhupada, like threw the chakra to save his disciple, his young, innocent, his daughter was being offended by this. Everybody else was oblivious, but Prabhupada dealt with it in a very efficient and powerful way. So it's one of the many sides of Prabhupada. He loved his disciples because they were serving Krishna and surrendered to Krishna. So we can end there. Tomorrow, we'll do this. We're going to go into it right now. I just want to take everybody's time. But thank you very much. All glories to Prabhupada. Sorry for the delay.